We could start on time, but we're not confident doing it. This will be the first time, right on the money. I hope everyone had a Merry Christmas. We did at our house. Glenda got to hold the new great-grandbaby.
Did you get a turn?
You know what? Everybody else was so busy, I was just watching them as I was taking pictures.
He held its hand.
I what? Oh, yeah, I played with her hands. I'm a hands person. I like little bitty. It's amazing how God is so, to make a human being that small and same functions as we grow into. Just absolutely amazing.
I mean, if they're going to call you out, you kind of have to. There you go. God got it. Not till he says no.
There it go again. This will be my last Sunday of this year. I pick up back up in March. I think David Parks has starting next week to finish up this little book. It's been a dandy little book, really. I'm trying to think. Let's recap. I started off with kindness, then goodness, then faithfulness, and gentleness. All very, in some ways, abstract ideas, things that people are born naturally with, the things that we have to work on, but they are traits of God. They are characteristics of God that we should exemplify in ourselves. And I can testify, it's tough. It's a good thing that God gives us grace to cover up some of the things that we can't seem to accomplish in our lifetimes. So we'll just go ahead and start. Let me see. Let me pick on somebody. Tommy, would you give an opening prayer for class?
Father, we're so thankful for the day that you've given to us and the time to be here and study and work together. We pray that everything we do would be acceptable. We pray that you'd be with the teachers this morning, that they would deliver the lessons that they would like to. Be with all those who are traveling and on the way back home. We ask for their safety. We pray this in your Son's name.
Amen. So what we've got here is gentleness. Before I give a structural definition, anybody got any ideas they want to expand on? What they think about gentleness?
Like when you're, just as an example, when you're handling a baby,
Oh.
you have to be
Gentle. That's a good point. That's a good point. So physically, we're talking about being more concerned about the physical behavior of someone. That's good. That's a different probably the scripture thing. Anybody else with any ideas? Kevin? Opposite. Yeah, I'd say it'd be the opposite of meanness. And I imagine in the course of our lifetimes, we've all had a little streak of meanness. I don't know. Donald's shaking his head, no, he don't have. Roger said he hadn't had his yet. So with that in mind, anybody else with anything? Well, let's look at some book type. First definition I found was the quality of being kind, tender, mild-mannered. Similar words, kindness, kindliness, and tenderness. I remember our discussion of the first character, fruit of the Spirit that I had, and that was kindness. And it kept coming up. We were talking simultaneously about the things about being gentle. Gentle is a form of kindness. Kindness is that thing of being kind. And number 2, softness of action or effect. Lightness. That kind of falls under Zach's definition there. Softness of action. We do things to make and soften our blows. And we're going to get into the book, and again, it's one of those things where I can't expound on how good the author does, so we'll be going probably straight through. If we run out of time, we'll just highlight some of the things I've already outlined, and hopefully get to the questions, because we're answering question number 1. But gentleness, it's a tender, loving aspiration that we should automatically have with things. And of course, Zach brought up a point, if we have little bitty kids or little bit of babies, and we're going to talk about a big kid in this one. We're going to talk about Teddy Roosevelt's son. So, and he's still a child to Teddy Roosevelt. And then we'll have I thought this morning of a sidebar involved with that. And we'll relate to that before we go into that. Then we're going to talk about Jeremiah, the weeping prophet, the one who was designated to go to the Israelite nation. And we're going to talk about how Jeremiah's job was to be sent to the Israelite nation to tell them what they're doing wrong, which has happened many times in the Jewish nation company. They can't seem to keep their minds on what they needed to be on. And of course that relates to us today. It's pretty tough for us to keep our minds straight all the time with the world's influence and everything else. There was a couple of things. I found a couple of scriptures that also mention gentleness. And someone look up 1 Corinthians 4:21. 1 Corinthians 4 and 21. And then someone go to Ephesians 4:2. Now, when I had a study of Ephesians, that chapter there was very, very prevalent to know. So it's a good thing we're going back to that. But Ephesians 4:2. We'll see if we can. Has somebody got that 1 Corinthians 4:21 yet? Yes. Now, it's the spirit of gentleness. Paul was in a position where, how is he going to come to this church with their problems? Is he going to come in heart, or is he going to come physically to teach a point? And how about Ephesians 4:2? Okay, Ann?
With all lowliness and gentleness, with long suffering, bearing with one another in love.
That pretty much summarizes probably all the fruits of the Spirit. But it's an excellent choice. And I think in that section it goes on to talk about one God, one baptism, one Jesus. So let's go, and if there's any comments, let's go to lesson 9, page 55. We'll read the key verse. Again, it's one of the other scriptures that mentions the word gentle or gentleness. I'll read it. But I was like a gentle lamb led to the slaughter. I did not know it was against me that they devised schemes, saying, let us destroy the tree with its fruit. Let us cut him off from the land of the living, that his name be remembered no more. In the reference of Jeremiah in that chapter 11, we're talking about how the designated kings of the Jewish nation were wanting to be like kings of their neighbors, just outright rule. And they didn't like the message that Jeremiah was sending or trying to tell or trying to procure what God wanted his people to do. The Israelite nation had sinned terribly. In all essence, they had picked to worship idols and the other things. And there was a cruelty to people, and we'll see that in the story. Let's see, so how much do we... Yeah, let's read the entire first paragraph first. We're going to read all this story. We'll have three different people, if we may. So starting on page 55, read to the top of page 56, please. Okay, Zach.
Theodore Roosevelt stands tall in our history and imaginations. This tough little fighter overcame adversity on the battlefield and in the political realm. It comes as no surprise that Hetty would push his sons to achieve greatness and be men of action. But in 1898, all of Roosevelt's pushing caused his son, Theodore Roosevelt Jr., to have a nervous breakdown. About the episode, Mr. Roosevelt says, "I guess I have pushed him a little too hard, and his nerves have finally given way." He would later tell his friend, William Cowles, "It has been a great temptation to push him. The fact is that the little fellow who is particularly dear to me has been fair to me all the things I would like to have been and wasn't. Hereafter I shall never press Ed either in body or mind." From this point on, Mr. Roosevelt committed himself to gentleness in the treatment of his son.
And this is where we'll have a sidebar also, because he's talking about a child of his own. But here again, President Roosevelt had found out he had gone a little over the edge, pushed his kids. Now, I remember my parents telling me that they wanted a life better for me than what they had. And they done everything they possibly could, or they thought they could, to lay that carpet out in front of me that I would have that easy road. Now, whether you come from that particular scenario or not, I don't know. But the point is, we as becoming parents have a tendency to follow suit. We have a tendency to help our kids do better. And it's a little tough line to figure out, fine line, where the push has to be to accept. Now, I'll give you a scenario. Being a past coach, I run into this scenario a lot of times, and it was upsetting. But there would be many parents that were pushing their kids to be the top athlete that they could ever be. But the backward scenario, that is, the parent was usually someone that never had that glory, never had that position to have been where that kid was. They wanted what that kid was going to have to go through. That's what they wanted. And that causes that parent to push and push and push. And substitute behavior for a child just doesn't work. You got to let that child live on its own, and it's tough. I used to tell some of the parents they were tearing their child down worse than I was. I said, my job is to tear the child down to where he understands what's going on. Your job is to build the child back up to the position he belongs in the world. And that was kind of tough. So gentleness comes into play. And I thought that was a good sidebar, considering that Teddy Roosevelt was talking about a child. And he come to the realization he had pushed the child too far. So he laid off. So we'll see what happens later on. The next paragraph, someone want to read the next paragraph there?
Paul writes his letter to the Galatian church. He teaches them out of gentleness and as part of the fruit of the Spirit. Gentleness is willingness to yield to Jesus, to speak his words, and be his hand in the world. Think about it for a moment. When Jesus is surrounded by the sick and the hurting people, he chooses to heal their wounds and repair their lives. When he is confronted with selfish pride and anger, he chooses to invite others into the relationship. When Jesus is falsely accused, beaten, put on trial, he chooses to remain silent. When Jesus is hung on the cross, he chooses to ask God to forgive those his executors.
Go ahead and finish out, Roger.
How difficult is it to surrender to gentleness has more about strength and reliance about our than about our weakness. The prophet Jeremiah shows us the power of gentleness.
So we're talking about an inward attitude, something that's coming from the heart to understand what the other person needs. We're taught as Christians not to lie, but I think we've all been guilty of using those little cliches, white lies, to help soothe what's going on in another person's life. It's very, very crucial to understand what the other person needs, and being gentle is part of that. Okay. Now, I'll read probably the whole next section starting to work out, and then we'll pick back up with other readers on where gentleness applies. At the time of Jeremiah's prophetic ministry, God's people are a mess. The northern kingdom of Israel has already been taken into captivity by Assyria. Their legacy is lost, and the promised land is inhabited by strangers and aliens. But Assyria is not the problem. In fact, Assyria falls early in the ministry of Jeremiah. It is the growing threat of Babylon that now looms large in the eyes of the remaining Jews. The southern kingdom of Judah becomes caught in a conflict for which they are no match. Babylon overtakes Assyria and then sets their eyes on Egypt. Josiah, the king who has led his people into spiritual reform, falls in battle to Pharaoh Necho. Necho demands a heavy tribute from Judah, takes their king captive, appoints new leadership, and then leaves Judah to face the Babylonian threat. And we find that in 2 Chronicles there listed, chapter 35, 20 through chapter 36 and 8. Judah is a nation that belongs to God. They are his people. A quick look into the history holds countless examples of how God has moved and how God's people have overcome incredible odds. But the faith of Judah has fallen. Idol worship has taken hold of the hearts of Judah. No longer do the leaders and the people look to or depend on God's strength to carry them through. They have turned their eyes to false gods, turned their desires to selfishness. The kings lead not to fulfill their God-given duty of protecting the people, but for personal gain. We find that in Jeremiah 22, 3 through 5. Tells us that one of the reasons God will pronounce judgment on his people is because of their treatment of one another. The fatherless, the widows, and the poor are robbed by the leaders. Oppression is overlooked and goes unpunished. Innocent blood is shed. All that happens so that a king called to lead God's people can look like the kings of other nations. This attitude will be the downfall of Judah. But God is not finished with his people in the midst of their sin and selfishness. God once again moves. He sends Jeremiah to prophesy, reminding them of God's great love and mercy. Jeremiah prepares to confront the world with God's message. So we learn that Jeremiah is now sent as a messenger to try to save the Israelite nation. And the next category, gentleness, is about reacting deliberately. Now, what's the word deliberately mean? On purpose. Well said. On purpose. You've set in mind, this is what you're going to do. Deliberate. Okay. Someone want to read that under the category gentleness is about reacting deliberately. The whole first paragraph goes over to page 58. Okay, thank you, Larry.
Jeremiah 1, we see Paul and Jeremiah prophetic mention. A powerful picture. Jeremiah recalls hearing the word of the Lord for purpose and
It tells a story, which you find in Jeremiah 1, about the almond branch. A person would regard the almond branch as some kind of a peaceful act. When you look at an almond branch, you know, it's got fruit on there, and you think it's doing its work. And then he turns right around and talks about a boiling pot. Boiling pot would mean something's going to happen. It's going to overflow. And that's in reference to the northern couple of people, the Babylons, that were getting ready to attack Israel. So gentleness calls you and me to act deliberately. When we choose to follow Jesus, we commit to be his hands and his voice in the world. This takes a commitment to gentleness. Again, gentleness is not weakness. Gentleness is an appropriate reaction to the rejection and anger of the world. Often gentleness is best seen in our reactions. And Proverbs 15:1 states, "A gentle answer turns away wrath." When someone is on the attack, are we allowed to yell and scream and kick our feet? No. We are called to maturity. We are called to grow up and act like Christ. Too often I want revenge, a chance to get back at someone, or a chance to lash out. I think if I can be louder, meaner, smarter, or wittier than someone else, I win the argument and walk away the victor. The reality is that I only shut the door to touching another with the presence of Jesus. I lose a chance to make an eternal impact. Gentleness calls me to yield my need to win, my need to look better, my need to defend myself. It calls me to speak God's word, not my own. And that's the part that's so tough for many. I know it is for me. We have a tendency, as it said in the first paragraph of our little article, we have a tendency to want to get back at somebody. We have a tendency to want revenge. We want to have a tendency to win. So we create an atmosphere that is not very healthy for most people. And it takes a Jesus-like person to be able to, what? Turn the other cheek? Take on what doesn't seem right? And make it a general approach. Comments or questions?
Well, like you said, it's human nature to want to get back at someone when you feel that you were wronged or mistreated. You want to make them feel the same way that you did without realizing that that's just going to make the situation worse. It's not going to fix anything.
Good point. Very good point, Zach. Excellent. And?
I was just going to say that when someone is real angry and attacks another one, and the other person acts calm and nice, the other's shocked, and it usually cools things down.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. I think I've told this story before. Richard and I playing golf at a golf course, and we're playing against two opponents. And the opponents, I don't know if they're playing the gamesmanship or not, but they're griping and complaining about everything and almost applying the word with the cause of it. And Richard and I just got offside. Says, well, let's just act super nice. And so we think we heaped up hot coals on top of their head by the way we acted. You know, sometimes you can win an argument that way, I guess, if you're just so calm that the other person has to take the realization that they're in the wrong place.
That gives a meaning to cooler heads,
Yes. Excellent point. In silence? Well, didn't we read where Jesus, when he was ready to take the cross on, he wouldn't admit to whatever the king was trying to get out of him? Not that he had to admit. The reason why he was silent was because the king was wrong. Okay, good job, everybody. So let's go to gentleness about relating appropriately. We need somebody to read that first paragraph. That's 58, top of 59. Okay, go ahead, Roger.
Gentleness is related appropriately. Jeremiah is often called to be the prophet. Throughout the book of Jeremiah, you will find times of lament and great anguish as the prophet pours out himself out to God. Jeremiah 8:18-22 shows the depth of reasons for Jeremiah's grief. He knows that the sinning inhabitants of the land. He knows the coming destruction. He knows a faithful God, so he weeps. He weeps that the people will not relent. He weeps that only punishment will change their course. Jeremiah loves the people of God. Their sins hurt his heart.
Let's go to another place. Let's go to the book of Jonah, the story of Jonah. Jonah did not want to go where he was sent to go, to give God's message to Nineveh. But he ended up being persuaded that that's where he needed to go. But even when he got there, he tried to put the message of God back on God. God, I know you're going to save these people. I know you're going to do this, but this is not what I want. These people need to hurt. These people need to be punished. And then even when God, through Jonah, done the work and Nineveh repented, what did Jonah do? He complained. He went up on the side of the hill and what we call pouted. He wanted his way. But he found out that his way is not the one that counts. Now, I always said this, in defense of Jonah, from one standpoint, because I know I'd probably had the same view, did Nineveh stay repented? No. They done exactly what Jonah said they'd do. But again, when we're called to do God's work, we're not to make the call as to what God feels like is success in the problem, in the situation. Zach, how about that next paragraph there? Jeremiah's weeping reflects.
Jeremiah's weeping reflects the grief that God feels over sin. We live in a world to which God calls us to minister, but that world can often be a hard place to live. We see evil on the evening news. Violence happens in all parts of the world. There is intolerance for God and His truth. How are we to relate to that kind of world? We remember what God has done in our lives. Romans 5:8 reminds us that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. His love and compassion led him to the cross. You and I know the devastating effects of sin. We can relate to a world that struggles with sin because we have been there. We still struggle. Jesus calls us to engage the world. 1 Peter 3:15 reminds us that the world needs to hear about hope and salvation. It also tells us that yelling and fighting and screaming won't make the impacts we need to make. We need to relate to the world with gentleness and respect. Firm in our convictions, we lovingly share Jesus with others.
Comments or questions? Like I said, this author's done a good job. He's pretty explicit by how he's interpreting the Bible for us. So gentleness is about risking vulnerability. During the course of Jeremiah's ministry, he made enemies. The people of Judah were not eager to repent and run back to the arms of God. The kings that led the people did not like the messages that Jeremiah spoke. Jeremiah was imprisoned, ridiculed, mocked, and was even the object of a murder plot. God revealed the plot to Jeremiah and protected him. But the idea of his own people whom he loved and tried to lead to God, planning murder, caused Jeremiah to grieve. In Jeremiah 11, 18 through 20, we see Jeremiah hurt. He walked in gentleness among them, but it was like the gentleness of a lamb to the slaughter. He was working for good, but the people were seeking something evil. Jeremiah wanted God's justice, but Jeremiah was also committed to God's cause. Following God means we are vulnerable in this world. As we gently work to point the world to see Jesus, there will be times when we get hurt. The old saying, "'Tis better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all," holds some truth for us. Gentleness requires that we love people enough to risk pain and hurt to be able to point them to Jesus. We're not called to security and safety, but to risk and boldness in our walk with God. I just now come to mind some of our news forecasts showing various countries where they are slaughtering Christians. We have a missionary over there that he tells us about some of the difficulties working with the government to help people over there. That tells us it's a rough world. And some people are willing to step out forward and do that hard work. In his favor, it's probably a good thing he was raised in that neck of the woods to know what it's like. For me to go over there and try to do what he does, you know, I'd be looking over my shoulder and scared to death. And I guess that's the reason why I don't go. That's a poor excuse except supporting our mission that we have. But it's a tough world when it comes to trying to, and I don't mean this when I say sell Jesus. I mean when we tell people about the love of Jesus. A lot of people don't realize yet that there's an afterlife and that they need to be a part of that afterlife. And that afterlife is divided into two different worlds. One you're going to love and one you're not going to love. But people don't want to look at that aspect. They only look at what's going on in their lives now. Questions or comments? Okay, we go to the cool down. Let's see. Anybody want to read it? Yeah, go ahead, Debbie.
Roosevelt's gentleness would make great changes in his son. Theodore Jr. would recover from his illness. In World War II, he led the landing of Allied soldiers on Utah Beach. He became a prominent politician, served as Assistant Secretary to the Navy, Governor of Puerto Rico, and Governor General of the Philippines. A commitment to gentleness worked a mighty change in the life of this man, and it can make a difference in our world. One prophet stands among God's people and calls for repentance. Evidence is scarce that anyone listened to Jeremiah. There is no great repentance like Jonah saw. There is no godly sorrow like Isaiah witnessed. Jeremiah shows us very little about what we would often consider successful in sharing God's word. But that means we need to see success differently. Jeremiah called the world to follow God. That is the meaning of success. You and I are called to share Jesus with the world. To do so, we must share Jesus in the same ways that Jesus shared himself. Yes, Jesus showed righteous anger. Jesus used some harsh words with the Pharisees, and those can be appropriate for us too. Remember, for every harsh confrontation with a Pharisee, there was a gentle touch of a widow. For each time we see Jesus angry, we see the gentleness of Jesus with children. Gentleness calls us to yield our actions, relationships, and personal desires to Jesus, and to boldly walk in the world, gently touching people with his presence and his power.
And as we get to the questions, let's group this with the other three fruits of spirit that we've talked about. It should be one of our major goals to try to build on ourselves those particular characteristics and traits, because they only exemplify God. They exemplify Jesus. I like the fact that it said that Jesus got mad. Jesus let it be known that he was dissatisfied, but it always recovered with some kind of positive gentleness work of art for humankind. I thought this too. I've never, well, I can't say, no, I haven't. But you watch these movies and you see these cop shows and they drag somebody in for interrogation, and they always have this approach of a bad cop and a good cop. The bad cop always goes first, antagonizes and intimidates the other person. What's the good cop do? He generalizes what's going on. And as Ann said, a lot of times when that does, you get more of a positive result in there. But they had to establish that. I really think that's what, when Jesus was getting angry and doing those things, I think that's exactly what that was. He was trying to build up a scenario. You think this is bad? Then he comes across how good he is and how it is. Now, that's my personal opinion on some of that. Comments, questions? Okay, let's see if we can't get through these questions. I didn't write down any one of them, except the first one. But they're in the book. I mean, you can always find the answers in the book or your own opinions. Question number 2. How do you react when someone hurts you? How could gentleness change this reaction? Well, Miss Ann, what'd you say a while ago?
Just give them comments or I had that happen to me one time years ago. And so the matter this woman got, I just smoothed it over. And for long she came around and was sorry.
What's the cliche we got now? Ann was the adult in the room.
Yeah.
Where
Somebody has to be.
somebody has to be. I agree. Okay. Anybody else? Answer that one. How about question 3? How does a gentle answer turn away wrath? Well, kind of Ann come across with that one too. But anybody got anything else there? How a gentle answer turns away wrath?
It keeps you from retaliating, wanting
To get back, yeah. We haven't mentioned this word, but again, I think it's humanistic. When you hear someone bring up an argument with you, along with the action you want to get back is you're defensive now. You're on the defense. You're looking to see what is this person trying to get out of you. And then that's really what causes retaliation, to get back, to win the argument. Any other? Question 4, what were the people of God like when Jeremiah was a prophet? Huh? Like we are today. They were worshiping idols. They weren't very kind to the people that needed help either, were they? That was a main thing too. Especially the widows and people that needed help. They wanted a king to be like their neighborhood king. Say, everything's glory, everything's good, and we got a lot of gold, and here, give me some of it. Materialistic, didn't help. Question 5, why is Jeremiah often called the weeping prophet?
he cried because the people weren't following God.
Yes. An indication when you're weeping could be one of the attitudes is that you're loving something so much in there that you have to show your emotion while you're doing it, I think. Jeremiah, I think, through the book of Jeremiah, was a very emotional guy. And remember when he had a talk with God to say, kind of like Moses. Moses says, "Who am I, God, that I should do this? I can't speak. I can't do anything." That's exactly what Jeremiah, I get, was trying to tell God there. You've picked the wrong person. I can't do this. His what, hon?
His heart was sick over their sin.
Yes. His emotion was overflowing. Glenda says his heart was overtaken by the love he had for these people. Question 6. How do Jeremiah's life and ministry inspire you to be gentle? Nobody? Just another example of what we need to do to be one of God's children. That's where Jeremiah comes in to play. And other significant figures in the Bible.
And he loved those Christians, even if they aren't Christians yet, but the people of God, he loved those in spite of their sin.
In spite of their sin.
And tried to help them,
Yes.
even if they wouldn't listen.
So let's go to where it really is. What did Jesus do for us? He went to a cruel cross, didn't he? He died for us. Now, people, if you don't understand, that's not love. We're not understanding what love really is. When a person self-sacrifices himself for others, that's being ultimate gentle. Why is it important to be vulnerable when we walk with Jesus? That's a tough question. Why is it profitable to be vulnerable with Jesus? All through the history of the Bible, was it all always great, good, on a platter? It seems like everything we've talked about, they've all had so much trouble. Look at King David. He's still regarded as the best king there ever was. He's still regarded as someone who was close to God.
Man after his own heart.
A man after his own heart. But did he have some failures?
Yes.
Which is a good indication for us. We can be relieved that we have the grace of God in us, the grace of Jesus doing it for us, that we're vulnerable too. We sin each and every day. But we have the assurance that if we try striving to force us to be with Jesus as he teaches, we'll be in that good place. Any questions or comments? That's class. Thank you very much. I think, David, do you take over next week? David Parks? No? I thought I'd look at the count. Well, I told you wrong, right? Okay.